Hi, I'm Kat Wiest of Yakima Chief Hops, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. Today, my guest is Melissa Myers of the Good Hop Bottle Shop in Oakland, and she is here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. Please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media to support journalism in the beer space. Check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We'll get into the conversation in just a minute, but first, this message.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Discover the advantage of using new and unique ingredients like lemon myrtle or Lapsang Souchong. First Tea has been working with brewers to introduce distinctive, high-quality botanicals for innovative craft beers. They focus on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsdtea.com.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
All right, so I've got a little bit to tell you about my guest today. Melissa Myers has 27 years of experience in the craft beer industry. She started in Philly learning how to brew at a brew on-premise facility. She then took that brewing knowledge and worked her way across the country back when there were only roughly 25 female brewers in the United States. She brewed in Boulder and Denver before landing a brewing job at the original Magnolia Pub and Brewery in San Francisco. She also brewed at Pyramid, Ross Valley, and Drake's before anyone knew what it was, in the East Bay before opening the Good Hop Bar and Bottle Shop in Oakland in 2014. The Good Hop is the first of a tiered business plan where her next step will be to open multiple TGH sites, as well as her own brewery and get those brewing boots back on. She brings a unique perspective to the industry with her knowledge both on the brewing side and the publican side, with an ever-growing resume of judging engagements and speaking about the history and ever-changing growth in this awesome industry. She's often seen with a huge smile on her face and invites you to come into the Good Hop and get in touch with your inner beer geek. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, Melissa, for hanging out with me today.
Of course. Thank you for asking me. I'm excited to do this.
So the first thing I have to ask you is, what are you drinking?
Oh, I am drinking, it's pouring in Oakland right now. So I am drinking a beer from Flatland Brewing Company out of Elk Grove, California called Flannel Shirt. And it is a mocha stout with Tahitian vanilla.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's kind of weird because I'm up here on the North Oregon coast and it's like the sunniest day we've had all year. And I'm drinking a Pilsner from Oakland.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, you're drinking Geisterfaust. Yes, that beer is great.
It's a perfect interviewing beer, I think. So I've got a few, I've got some ideas of where this conversation might go. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Back just kind of based on your background here, you traveled across the country many years ago as a young queer woman in beer. Things have changed a lot in the beer industry in terms of the makeup of, who is and is not a brewer. What was that like? Did you feel that you faced any barriers? Did you feel safe? Did you find, spaces that you loved or did not love along the way?
Yeah. So I started in Philly and it was a brew on premise. So basically home brewing in somebody else's space. And they ran their business poorly and had to close it. And by then I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing. This is the best thing I've ever done in my whole life. This is my career. So at the time in 96, I date myself, all of the cool brewing, all of the innovation was coming from California. So I was like, all right, I got to go to California. So I left Philly. I hit 42 breweries between Philly and Colorado, because that's what you do when you're a new brewer and you're like, I'm going to go to everything. And I drew pictures and maps and it was insane. But I get to Colorado and I go to a random brewery and they were like, oh, are you going to go see Deb, the brewer at Rock Bottom? And I was like, there's a female brewer, get out. I had been to 42 breweries and the only females I'd ever seen were bartenders, right? Which is not terrible. That's very common. But, I got brewery tours. I talked to brewers. I talked to cellar people. I talked to everyone I possibly could, and nobody was female. Nobody was a woman. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to go see Deb. Like, we were best friends. And I walked into the brewery and I was like, hey, is Deb here? And they were like, no, you here for the job? And I was like, yeah. What is it? I'm totally here. What are we doing? So I interviewed with Deb and she ended up hiring me, which was amazing. My education had just been being lucky enough to be under people who were good teachers and kind enough to teach me things. So she literally taught me physics equations on the side of sweating tanks about what was happening. I never worked for a brewer that ever said, just go do that, without saying, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. This is why you have to do it. This is the chemical reaction that's happening. And so I worked underneath her for a while, which was amazing. But my heart was still being pulled to California. So I brewed around Colorado for a little bit and came out to California. I basically harassed / convinced Dave McLean, the owner of Magnolia at the time, to hire me, because he had 4 beers on tap, but he had 12 taps. And I felt like maybe he could use some help. And I just dug in. He also was an amazing teacher for recipe control and design. And I didn't really think about the aspect that I was the only female brewer until I had been told there was another one. But I did notice when I got to California, like, I would be in rooms and it would just be me and a ton of dudes, and I don't know, I can hang with the best of them. So I didn't experience a lot of like misogyny, or, I mean, if I did, I didn't know it. It was never blatantly obvious to me. And I just surrounded myself with a bunch of brewers who were really stoked to see me in the industry. So I know I've had a very different experience than most people. And after coming back into the industry, when I opened the bar, I was shocked to see how many women were everywhere. It's cellar work, designing labs, being the brewer, being the brewmaster, being, every aspect, which I had never seen before, that many women in it. And then I started hearing stories about their experiences and I was like, wow, mine is not like that. And I'm happy to see that this industry is recognizing that for us, for women, and working on change for that. I think that's super important.
I'm stoked that you had such a positive training experience. A lot of young brewers, it seems like that's how most of us learn. It's on the job, and you never really know who's teaching you. Like, where did they learn? Are they teaching you somewhere? I remember being told that you shouldn't run caustic on a bright tank that still has CO2 in it, because the chemical reaction would make the caustic not work. And, now I realize, I mean, not because I learned this from experience, but I did find out later that no, it totally makes the tank implode. It's it's an incredibly dangerous chemical reaction that takes place. It's not that your tank's not going to get cleaned, it's because you're going to crush it.
Right. You know what? I also, when I was at Magnolia, all of the tanks are in a cold room, all of them, fermenters, bright tanks, everything's in a cold box. And at the time we weren't using sanitizer. He's like, you run the caustic, you run hot water rinse, and then you just seal it up. And I was like, I think that's going to be a problem. Like, we're going to fuck some shit up. You know what? On my second day, I fucked some shit up. I imploded a tank and I was like, oh my God, it's my second day. I haven't even made enough money to pay for this tank. Like, what am I going to do? And because he said, just seal it up. And then the hot water, the hot air, the steam in there just sanitizes it. It was not that's not right.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to learn. It turns out brewing is like, there's like chemistry and physics and fluid dynamics and engineering. And, we don't just kind of shuffle around and hold beers up to the light, admiring them.
Right? I mean, we do that too, but we
definitely do that too.
I have a degree in social work. Like, that's great for the bar side of it. But as far as the chemistry and mathematics side, those two things do not go together.
So how long were you out of the brew house when you decided to step behind the bar and launch the Good Hop?
Yeah. So, oddly, I was out way too long, for my pleasure, but I was going through some stuff and I guess I kind of had to get far enough away to see how awesome it is and how much I really wanted to be in it. So I was actually out for about 5 years, unfortunately, in a job that I kept calling my temp job. Everyone's like, where are you working?
I'm sure they loved that.
Yeah. I'm like, where are you working? Don't worry about it. It's a temp job. how long you been there? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And so when I decided to come back in, at the time, I left in 2008. At the time, there was 20 brewers for every single position that existed. And I had stepped out, unfortunately. And when I tried to get back in, there just wasn't anything available at the time. There were fewer brewers at that time. And so I'd gone to the small business class, and I was like, it was a small business class. The first night, they're like, say your name and your business concept and how much money do you need to start. And everyone's like, I need, $1,000 for a computer, and I need maybe $5,000 for like an office rental space. And I was like, I need $1.5 million. And the teacher was like, cool, I'm gonna see you after class. And I was like, man, this is the first day. Shit. All right. And they basically talked me out of it. Like I didn't have any money of my own. So at the time I didn't have any money of my own, and I didn't have any investors. So $1.5 million was going to be real hard to come by. So initially it was supposed to be a brewery, but working with what I had and the bank situations in 2009, 2010, I pivoted a little bit. I hate that word from COVID, but it's true.
Oh yeah, we're done with that. But
I know everyone twitches and has a PTSD response. But so then I decided if I could get enough money from the bank, that it would just be me and the bank who owned this business. I have no business partners. I have no investors. And so that it would be mine, right? Eventually, after I could pay off the loan. I didn't really want to own a bar, to be honest. I love bars. I think they're amazing places to be. And they're great communities, but I was a brewer, right? In my heart, I just wanted to keep brewing, but I also wanted to learn how to run a business, because I figured at some point I would open a brewery, and I had too many friends open breweries who were brewers and didn't know what they were doing and got robbed blind, or their best friend stole all the money, or, the board voted them off their own island because they weren't getting the money back fast enough. And so for me, this was an intentional pause from brewing to learn the business aspect side of it.
I mean, hats off to you. It just sounds so smart, especially being the decider. It's something that I know I'd never considered. I took some small business classes. I had a point where I was like, I'm going to be a business owner. And, you think that you're going to have this thing, and then you find out, oh, unless you have all the money yourself, like you have to get investors. And that's kind of another job, getting investors and keeping your investors happy, and also being, the small business owner, and, keeping your passion alive. It's really tricky. So I admire folks that can make it work, but you've certainly made the Good Hop work. What is it? 9 years? It's crazy.
9 years in June. Yep.
I can't believe it.
9 years in June, and we made it through COVID. Yay. Which is basically like adding a decade. You might as well say it's 19 years.
For real. Yeah. The COVID years count 3 times each. So yeah, that adds up. So you and I never worked together, but I met you when somebody put me on to I don't remember the platform. I think it was Kickstarter, for just like finishing touches on the bar. Like, okay, you can, we'll put your name on a seat for this much. And I got my name, like, spray painted by a local artist on the floor I think it was in front of Stouts. And I was like, oh, that's fitting. Thank you.
You might still be there, because a lot of those names, it turns out, emblazoned forever on the floor doesn't happen when it's cement and it's porous. Science.
Oh no, I don't think I am there anymore, and it could be my fault too, because I've definitely shuffled in front of that cooler, quite a bit. But it was awesome, and I remember when the Good Hop opened coming in, and I was really intimidated by you because I thought you were so cool, and it turns out, like, you are actually really cool, but not very scary. So thank you.
I'm honestly just a big teddy bear.
So we do have a brewery in our history in common. We've never worked together, but we did brew a collab one year. You came down to Santa Cruz and brewed with me, and I can't even, for the life of me, I cannot remember what we made. But you had Collabapalooza going on at the Good Hop. And I have a feeling that was like, you just missed brewing, and you're like, I'm going to do a thing where I brew a beer with all these people, and then I can put it all on tap at my bar, and I can be in the house.
Totally. I mean, that was part of the plan when I opened the bar. Was I was like, I'm still a brewer, damn it. You know, like I'm gonna keep brewing with everybody and do a bunch of collabs. And turns out being the sole owner of a small business takes up a lot of time. And a brew day takes up a lot of time, right? So it happened
Oh,
less and
yeah.
less. But I think when we brewed, I was still like, I'm doing all the collabs. How many collabs can I do? Which, as well, a lot of us probably know, collabs are more about hanging out with people who have knowledge, sharing knowledge and having really cool conversations that you wouldn't just have with like a patron in a bar. But it's not really like get super dirty and get in there. Although with you, it was. I remember climbing. I think I climbed into one of the tanks. But a lot of
I was
times,
like,
I
hey,
don't
I
touch.
hate this job. I'm going to have you do it today.
Yeah, you get in there. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I think I don't even touch a single thing, right? Because mostly it's like, well, you know what hops look like, you know what grain looks like. Like, let's go have a beer over here and talk about things, So, um, unless you collab with an old co-brewer and then they start you off and then disappear for 6 hours and
Right.
leave you in the brew house, which totally happened. It was super fun though.
I love one of my favorite things about collabs is how it doesn't matter how many different sizes of systems you've worked on or different brew houses you've been in. Like there's always some weird little trick. Last week I brewed a collab at Grand Fir, and one of the brewers there he put the sight glass inside of a pitcher before putting it in the caustic bucket. And Whitney was like, have you ever seen anyone do this? I was like, no, I haven't, but that's brilliant. Of course you should put the sight, then you
Right.
throw clamps in there and it doesn't get chips. Just like all these weird little tricks. I'm like, I consider myself a relatively intelligent person. I've never thought of that. Cool.
Right.
Trick.
I mean, I think that's actually the part about collabs that I like, right? And I'm more removed from the actual brewing side of it now, but you have weird conversations, right? All of a sudden you have some crazy conversation about a hop edition where you're like, I've been doing this for so long. How have I never thought of that? Right. Or like, oh, you put it in a pitcher because it makes it safer, or whatever, right? Like it's all the little nuances that we all figure out on our own while we're, kicking and punching the dashboard. But then a new person comes in and you're like, hey, let me show you this cool thing I do.
Yeah. Right. No big deal. I came up with that one.
Right. Totally on my own.
Yeah. So you were lured to San Francisco by the call of California. What a wonderful place to land. And now you're based in Oakland. What made you, how did it become Oakland? Most of the breweries were East Bay, but when you decided to open the Good Hop, what made you say, like, this is my spot, Oakland for life?
Yeah. So at the time I lived in San Francisco, right? I brewed in San Francisco for a while with Magnolia. And then, outside, I lived in San Francisco, but brewed at 2 other places outside of San Francisco. I'd taken this business class in San Francisco. My heart was there. I loved the bars there. I was going to do it there, right? I talked to City Beer, which is basically the same concept as us. I want to make sure I was far enough away from them. And San Francisco was having this like basically shit the bed on small business moment where like, it was 8 months where I had gone into the planning department. I saw a different person every time. And every time the one person would go, well, you need to do this and find out if the landlord can blah, blah, blah. And I'd come back and be like, okay, so I answered this question. And some guy would be like, actually, that doesn't matter. That's not true. You need to know this, right? Like it was so frustrating. And they had a bunch of moratoriums on ABC licenses. It was just frustrating. And then a friend of mine who they're in like the 3rd tier of the Oakland running of the city, right? Like they were like the assistant to somebody who was the assistant to somebody else and knew this person in the planning department. And she was like, I don't know. I talked to him and he was like, that sounds hella cool. He'll tell her to come talk to me. And I was like, oh, Oakland, man. I don't know. All right, Oakland, sure. And I came over and I talked to him and he immediately was like, yep, this is great. Here's my email. Here's my phone number. Like, start looking at locations. He's like, literally, you can email me or text me the address and I'll tell you yes or no. And within a week, I had more answers from him. Yes or no. I just had more answers from him than I had in a year and a half in San Francisco's planning department. So like Oakland showed that they wanted businesses here, that they wanted new things to come in and that they were really eager to help, right? I felt like I had a person in my pocket. Like I didn't have a partner. I didn't have anyone else making decisions with me, but I had a planning guy who was like, yeah, let's do this, and that was pretty huge, to be honest. So in the quest to find a location, I ended up moving over here. I felt like if I were going to be a business owner in a city, I also needed to live in that city, right? Like, I'm going to put a bunch of money into this city, hopefully, right? With business and taxes,
Yeah.
that I should get to enjoy some of the fruits of my labor and also be a part of it, right? So when I first opened, I can't say how many people I had never known before were like, "You from here?" Like Oakland's very proud of being a resident here. And so many people, "You from here? You from here?" And, I'd be like, "Yes, I am right now." you know? But yeah, so I think, to be honest, this wasn't my first idea. But Oakland was trying to rebuild itself. This was 8 years ago, and I think it was seeing that it needed cooler, like it'd become a better city, right? In the late 90s, it was on the top 5 of everything: homicides, crime, worst place to live, everything, right? And that was in the late 90s. And it had slowly started building itself back up to be a city of notoriety. And it was really,
I recall National Geographic gave it was 2013, anywhere between 2012 and 2014. National Geographic called Oakland was in the top 5 cities to visit in the United States.
yeah.
And it was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, I think that was 2014, because we were like,
yeah.
Damn, right on.
You're like, National Geographic says, check it out.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically how I landed here. Like, I mean, I like this city. This city has a very, like, it's got a ton of history, it's got history in every direction, and it's just very mom and pop. You don't see chain stores here. You don't see big, huge box stores. They are around. They're on the outskirts or in the neighboring towns, which feels like the same place. But if you drive down the basic streets of Oakland, it's all, mom and pop spots. And if it's a chain, they have 3 locations and they're all here, like it's that kind of place. Like I'm a big fan of Taco Bell, and there's maybe like 2 in the city that I know of, right? Where you go to a different place and they're on like every 5th corner. Just as an example, like you just don't see a lot of those kind of places here, because Oakland's kind of got this soul that runs itself.
Hell yeah. I was down a few weeks ago, and a friend asked me, where do you consider your home? And, I kind of, I'm from the Central Coast of California and moved around California quite a bit. But like I grew up, my grandparents lived in Oakland. That was like where I went to visit my grandma. So, and I've got so many friends that I just feel like that's like my heart is the East Bay. I don't have family there anymore, but you're there, you're my family. So many friends kind of like stuck around there. I'm definitely on the Oakland for life. I think it's a really wonderful, like, it's a pretty small city for having so much art and culture and
100%. 100%, and its pride is different and stronger in different neighborhoods for different reasons, which is cool.
I feel that you have, the Good Hop it's beloved by industry folks and local brewers. I mean, that's true. I feel that's true. I can say that as like a true statement. Do you feel that if it were a brewery, like if you had a little 3-barrel system in the back and you were also making beer, do you think that would have impacted the love that you receive from the industry folks and the local brewers? Or is it kind of like Melissa, the multi-maven, is here to curate your beers and kind of tell you how it is?
That's a super interesting question, because I mean, when I first opened, always from the beginning, I was like, fine, cool, I'm going to open this bar, but I'm a brewer, damn it. Right. Like, and I was like, within 5 years, I'm going to, take my knowledge of business ownership and leverage the bar for money and open a brewery. That's the goal. That's the goal. That's the goal. And it turns out I had a 7-year loan. So 5 years was totally not reasonable for that timeline. But people who knew me, people who've been following me from Mike Drake's days or from my Magnolia days, every time I'd see them, "Hey, Melissa, how's it going? When are you going to start brewing again?" And I'd just be like, "Yeah, okay, just hold on a minute. I'm trying to learning some shit about business right now." I honestly, I don't know. Now, like, the goal is still hopefully to open a brewery, but like so much has changed, right? I've been out of brewing. I've been out of brewing my own, being a brewer at a brewery, as a paid job since late 2008. And so much has changed since then. right? So, I don't know. I think what I've learned by having this bar is that I'm a great publican. And I think I'm a great champion of craft beer. And so if I were making, I mean, yeah, would I love to have a 3-banger barrel system? That'd be awesome. But what if the beer is shit and people are like, oh man, I got to go to that bar, but her beer's there and I don't want to drink that beer. And I don't know, like those.
No, I'm going to hurt Melissa's feelings because I'm always going to order the guest tap.
Right. I'll be like, oh, can I just get that other brewery that I know, like I think that's a weird blend. And I don't, good or bad. I don't know if it's good or bad, but in the craft industry, those two things don't necessarily always go together, right? Like you're either really good at brewing or you're at least solid enough that it sustains your business, or you're on the other side of it. You're the retailer side of it, which is what the Good Hop is, right? So we champion other people's beers. And hopefully we champion brewers that maybe wouldn't have gotten as much attention if they didn't land at the Good Hop. Or maybe, a new brewery starts and we're like, oh, shit, this beer is fucking good. All right, we're going to talk about them a lot. We're going to get people to know about them. And if I were making my own beer at the same time, that would be a really hard pull, right?
Yeah, like, that could be
those guys are pretty conflict. Good. And whatever, here, just try mine instead. Like, right. Like it'd be weird.
Do you feel that, you've got a lot of people coming in and I was there one time and a salesperson was in kind of tasting you through some beers saying, hey, what, these are the offerings that we have. This is what you could put in your cooler. This is what you could put on tap. So, you're very involved in the beer industry as the publican. Do you feel that you have been able to kind of follow trends and stay up to snuff, so to speak, in terms of being a brewer just by your relationship with your, vendors isn't the right word, with your customers?
A little bit, if you'd asked me that question 3 years ago, I'd have been like, hell yeah, 100%. But COVID definitely changed a bunch of things. It became survival mode for all of us, right? It became survival mode for breweries and it became survival mode for small businesses and bars. And I think that whereas before I would have tons of, on Mondays, I would get upwards of 180 emails and it would be from distributors and then from individual reps and from different breweries and stuff like that. And I get about 40 now. So it's dropped off considerably. And there's many reasons that could be its own podcast about why. But I think being farther and farther out of it, it's harder to stay up to snuff, as you said, right? Like, cryo and incognito and all these things are coming out where it's like, wait, hold on, what is that? And I'm not around it every day. So it's a little bit more, it takes a little bit more, right? To make sure I get that information in so that I can give it to my staff so that when we put it up on a board and someone's like, what's that? That they actually know what they're talking about. Because for me, that's super important. That's why we're there. Otherwise, we'd just be a dive bar who goes, what do you want to drink? Right.
Totally. Like get a beer at Applebee's, like
yeah, totally.
Whatever the Oakland equivalent is. Since
right. Like, do you want a light beer or a dark beer? Just pick one, right? So right. But I'm very grateful that there are some pretty amazing beer reps out here. And I just met with one today and he doesn't have to taste me. I buy their beer on a very regular basis. But he'll come in and be like, I'm like, you don't have to do that. And he's like, no, he goes, I actually just want to sit down and talk to you about beer so we can just have a cool conversation. And because of people like him, I feel like I can be like, yo, dude, what's this cryo bullshit? Like, what is this? What does it look like? Can you tell me all about it? Can you come in at a staff tasting and talk about it? So like, I'm grateful for that because I feel like where the collabs have kind of dropped off a little bit, I have very, very knowledgeable people selling beer who can sell it to you on a pretty base level. Like, hey, this is the beer. It's a pale ale. It's got hops in it. To, hey, it has this and this and this in it. Let's talk about it. And let me tell you about when we put it in the kettle or when we dry hopped it. And this is why. And oh my God, it totally tastes like, it's cool to see the beer rep nerds nerd out, right? Because they can sell at any level they need to. And I think and hope that when they come to the Good Hop, they get to sell at a different level.
Well, as brewers, we know, you can make the best product. It can be totally dazzling. But if you don't have somebody that can relay that product to the customer, then it's really just any other product. So that's huge.
And it comes down to maybe just the beer name, or maybe it's the art on the can, or, then it's something slightly different,
It doesn't hurt that this is a delicious beer, but the Geisterfaust is covered in pink skulls, and it makes me happy. And
of course.
No, yeah, but yeah.
And it's phenomenal, right?
We all shop with our eyes. I mean, I do, at least.
Yeah. I mean, when I worked for Ross Valley, I was the brewer. I was everything that had to do with the brewery. So even I was the delivery person for our local accounts and sales reps, and being the sales rep. And I remember I walked into like some bottle shop or whatever, and I this is going back, but I'm carrying 2 bombers, right, with our labels on it that I literally had hand put the label on. And, I'm walking towards this guy, and he just looks at me and he shakes his head. He's like, nah. And I literally went, okay. And I just turned around and walked out, because I was like, it turns out I'm a brewer. I'm not a sales rep. And that is a skill in and of itself, and I think this industry, from when I was in it, when I was, deep in the brewing side of it, and up to 2008, it's changed so much. Like now I think breweries have in-house graphic design people all the time, and it's not just your buddy who's like, yeah, I think I can make a label for you off this weird label program I found, it's crazy. It's just so much different, and it's got so many other facets and levels to it that it didn't have when back in my day.
Naming beers is no longer a fun part of the job. It's like it's a horrible chore because of all of the copyrights out there. Yeah.
Totally. I can't even, I was terrible at naming beers before, when it mattered even less. And now I'm like, oh my God,
Well, I've got a few other things that we're going to dive into here, but right now we're going to take a short break for this message and then come right back for more conversation with Melissa Myers of The Good Hop.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Discover the advantage of using new and unique ingredients like lemon myrtle or Lapsang Souchong. First Tea has been working with brewers to introduce distinctive, high-quality botanicals for innovative craft beers. They focus on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsdtea.com.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
All right, so Melissa Myers, it's obvious we just took a very brief break. We're talking about kind of Oakland culture, and you're an East Bay bar owner. How has the neighborhood culture embraced your business? How has your business kind of embraced that Oakland culture? You're on Telegraph Ave. I know that it can be somewhat of a mixed bag.
Yeah, it's hard. When I was looking for a location, I looked for a location for 3 years, and the entire time this location was available. And I wanted something different, right? I had a different concept. I wanted a different facade. I wanted a different storefront. And after 3 years, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, let's go here. This neighborhood is, it seemed like it was up and coming. It had a ton of amazing history in it that I really wanted to embrace, with specifically not in the building that I'm in, but in that location. Many buildings before had been a jazz club. The Black Panthers had owned a house right behind it. So there's a ton of history, and I really found that part of that neighborhood, which is technically called Kono, which is Koreatown and Northgate. It's 5 blocks up from the Fox Theater and 5 blocks from the Paramount. So it sounds like on paper it should be in the thick of things. But it is, I thought it would change. And to be honest, it didn't change very much. And then COVID rolled through town and changed all of our lives for the better or for the not. And in that neighborhood, it changed it for the not. So with having a bunch of businesses closed, there are fewer businesses shooing off street people, and shooing off people who are doing nefarious things. And so sadly and unfortunately, that neighborhood has actually gotten terrible. I did not know that as a business bar owner that I would also basically become a social worker. I mean, I get it a little bit, right? You go to a bar, people talk to your bartender, you're kind of that side therapist thing. But this is me sending, letters to the city councils, going into all of these planning meetings. But that's not really where I want to be spending my time. But, it's a fight to get them to pave our street. It's a fight to get them to acknowledge that we were broken into. The bar across the street's been broken into 3 times. The bar down the street's been broken into twice. Like, it becomes a much bigger, if you want to be part of the community, which I do, and I did, you can't just like sit in your little tiny spot and be like, well, this is where I am and everything outside is whatever it is. Who cares? It just doesn't work that way. Right. So on the flip side of that, I know all of the street people. They look out for my place. I literally watch them be like, yo, don't go in there. Don't fuck with her. Which is nice. It's nice to know that I've got a little help on the outside, even though sometimes it's a little crazy, down there. The one thing that I would say, which is a bummer, and Oakland's having this problem everywhere, is that in a 3-month time period, I got 23 emails from people who reached out and said, hey, I love your bar, but when we were there, we came out and our car had been broken into. Hey, I love your bar, but when I left, we were aggressively mugged. Hey, I love your bar, but it's just too hard to get in there with having people ask me for things, and so it's a weird juxtaposition to have. On the inside, we have this thing that I think is amazing. It has a huge community. Like you said, industry people like it. We are definitely a neighborhood bar. All of my regulars are not industry people. They're people who walk there from their homes. And then on the outside, it's this just constant fight with what's happening in Oakland, which is a greater situation than just our little bar,
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll change someday.
I know you have like very famous potholes. Broadcast Stewart just had a funny article about, but it's a wealth disparity. It's like where the dollars go to fix roads kind of depends on, who's in it. And
100%, and on our block, I mean, technically we're on Telegraph Ave, which is a major road in Oakland, but we're on a corner. And so 24th Street, on our block of 24th Street, we have a parking lot, we have a halfway house, we have what used to be a towing company that is apparently going through something that may or may not take 10 years. So there's no action happening there. And then behind that block is Tent City, right? So the city of Oakland does not care about our block or our corner or much about that neighborhood, which is unfortunate. But I would say, oddly, in a weird positive way, I've seen more police cars and fire trucks and ambulances in our neighborhood in the last month than I've probably seen in the last 3 years combined. Part of that's not because it's not great, but the other part of it is that it has gotten so bad that the city of Oakland now recognizes that it's a neighborhood that needs to have some attention paid to it. And with that, I hope that it's better attention and not something that gets worse.
Right. So just this morning, or maybe it was yesterday morning, I read that Narcan was finally approved by the FDA as a life-saving antidote for overdose.
Yeah.
And I know that you have that you've done training with your staff and are involved with FentCheck.
Yeah.
Do you mind just kind of talking about why you've chosen to invest in that type of community care?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, despite the conversation we just had about my particular block and my corner, if I had this bar in a neighborhood that had none of those issues, I would still have FentCheck and Narcan in it. I don't think, like you said, it's a wealth disparity, right? Except that the reality is that wealthy people do drugs too. So I would have them no matter what. So FentCheck is this amazing organization. This woman got tired of seeing her friends and her clients die from fentanyl-laced drugs. And so she started campaigning to get FentCheck, which is It's like Kleenex. You call Kleenex tissues Kleenex. It's basically a test strip that you can test your drugs before you put them in your body. And she kind of started coming out to some of the bars, probably more of the seedier neighborhoods, and said, "Hey, will you put these in your bathrooms? Will you put these at your bars so people can test their drugs?" And immediately I was like, absolutely, absolutely. This happened after COVID, after bars started opening. And when we announced, like, we threw it all over our social media, right? We have FenCheck, and all the bars in our neighborhood have FenCheck. It was interesting. Some of the comments were, I didn't think the Good Hop was that kind of place. But what kind of place do you think it is when there's a bathroom and a door that closes? You have no idea what happens in those bathrooms in any bar, in a steakhouse bar, in anything, in any bar of any degree of wealth or disparity. And for us, it was more of, I really want my customers to stay alive, right? It's after COVID. We already have fewer than we did before. I really like them. I'd like them to come back, and people were partying. They were coming out of COVID and they were like partying their asses off. Maybe people who had never done it before, right? And all of a sudden they're rolling with an 8-ball and they're dying because they don't know what's happening, right? So for us, it was really important to put that offer out there without judgment. So all of our test strips are in the bathrooms, and there are cups there so that you can test it in the privacy of the bathroom and do whatever you want with it after that. But also with what came with FenCheck was the opportunity to have access to Narcan. And Narcan is this amazing drug that if you use it on someone who does not have fentanyl in their system, nothing happens. It doesn't hurt them. It doesn't do anything. I could literally shove it up my nose right now and nothing would happen. But if you're somebody who has fentanyl in your system, the Narcan will basically deactivate it to a point and save your life. So we've always had a nice supply of it at the bar. We keep some of it out in public. If somebody wants to take it, they can. I literally noticed yesterday we've had 4 boxes sitting out for the public and I'm down to 1. And I was like, oh, well, all right then. And a lot of people I know will be like, oh yeah, I have a box in my backpack. Most people in my neighborhood have a box on them at some point. And we've actually used it twice for 2 people who've gone down outside the bar. Not customers in any way for us, but a guy across the street went down and I grabbed a box and ran out there. Another guy went down on our sidewalk in front of our bar. And somebody started yelling that this dude looked like he was dead. So we went out there again. The stigma, like a lot of things, comes with, oh, there's drugs, it must be terrible. You're totally helping people use drugs. And the reality is I didn't know either one of those people, and they both survived and they both got to live another day. And that is where my judgment stops for that. Like, good for you. You get to live another day. If you don't the next time, then maybe you didn't learn something, and that's all on you too, but this day, you got lucky.
I'm a big proponent of shattering the stigma around those things. I have used drugs. I'm not really a drug user, but I'm interested in both of these programs because you don't need to be told that drugs are ubiquitous in the United States and that fentanyl is an issue, and it's terrifying. So
yeah,
the more people that are educated and involved, and the less pearl clutching there is, and the more education that there is surrounding these programs, all it's going to do is save lives and make communities better. That's,
it should be like aspirin. I don't judge somebody for taking 3 Tylenol because they have a headache. Why would I judge somebody for testing something they're going to put in their body? Or why would I judge someone for having this amazing thing that saves lives? That's very handy. And oddly, you can't fuck it up, right? I don't have any degree in medical, but I can't kill anybody using Narcan on them. The worst thing I can do is nothing happens. The best thing I can do is I can save their life, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah. So you've saved 2 people just by asking questions and getting involved and saying, hell yeah, I want that in my bar. And again, they're not bar customers. And if they were, whatever, but you've saved 2 lives in your community.
Yeah. And the second one, I don't know if I saved his life or he was just taking a nap, but once he came to, and it was clear that we were on the phone with an ambulance, he was like, oh, no, no, no. And he literally got up and ran away. And I was like, all right, man, have a good day. You're welcome. Happy Friday. Like
TGIF, am I right?
totally, but the fact that it's there and it's not scary to use, like that's the if I had to take a needle and put it in a jar and pull up the serum and put that in someone's arm, I'd be like, I don't know, like that's not my forte. I don't know how to do that.
Or do the Pulp Fiction heart stab.
That's like how hard do
level.
I hit him, right? Like, but this is designed. It's designed for anybody to use to save somebody, and that's pretty amazing.
Well, I view you and the Good Hop as very community invested. I always feel like hanging out in the Good Hop is like being in the living room, and the bartenders are always just like, oh my God, all of the education and everything, it's tangible. And I think especially post-COVID, that's one of the huge complaints for a lot of people is like, or maybe it's just coming from a specific generation of like, oh, customer service ain't what it used to be, but it's kind of like family there. And you mentioned earlier in our chat about how when you opened the Good Hop, you didn't realize, like, traveling across the country and like, oh wait, Deb, there's another woman, and then opening the Good Hop and seeing how many women were brewing in the Bay Area at that time. I think I had just kind of come onto the beer scene, and there were a solid dozen of us, and I know now there's even more than that. And the Good Hop has really served as a hub for women brewers and industry members kind of coming together and drinking beers and airing our laundry as it were.
Airing grievances and finding safe spaces.
Airing grievances, yeah. On multiple occasions, I've been in for just a full packed house. Like, hey, I'm going to highlight women in the Bay Area beer industry. It was one of your first events, and maybe like 2015, but it was packed. It was displaying of photography.
Oh yeah.
And it's like we couldn't even see the pictures. They were like so many people in there. It was like, hey, I want to see this picture. And it's like, I got nowhere to go. Sorry. Like, maybe if I scoot to the left, you can, catch the edge of the forklift in that one. But that's the best I can do.
Yeah. I mean, that was an amazing. I think I'm queer, and so when I came out, it was a lot of like, well, when you watch TV, I don't see my family on TV, right? I don't see what my potential future could be on TV, right? And so I think, people be like, well, how do you know that you would be brewing? And I just fell into it, right? But like, I didn't grow up going, I'm going to be a brewer, like it's not, probably most people don't, unless their parents are home brewers, right? But I think that particular event, like, this female photographer had decided to photograph women in the industry. And it was at all levels, right? It was like forklift operators and warehouses up to brewers, or I think there was even like a VP or whatever, like it was everything. And so I feel like the turnout on that was like just the sheer desire to see other people in your situation, right? To just be like, oh my God, look at all of us. Look at all of us doing all this stuff, where you don't normally see that because we'd all kind of been doing our own thing in other places. And it wasn't common at that time to be like, where are all the women? I want to go hang out with them, Yeah, that event I think kicked off a pretty amazing, like, holy shit, there are a lot of us, like, why don't we all keep hanging out? Like, let's check in with each other, and I'm going to come hang out with you and support you. And maybe we'll, peel off and make, this own Pink Boots chapter, or we'll peel off and make this group or whatever, and it was pretty awesome to just see that sheer volume of women in this industry.
I think it speaks volumes too if you provide the space. If you provide the space and you tell people you're invited, I welcome you here. There's a huge lesson that, as a society to be learned, not just the beer industry. Create space and extend the invitation and see what kind of community, you can actually foster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I was having this conversation with somebody, and that in this industry, I think one of the things that drew me to it, right, when I first got into it, is that I'd be talking to somebody about their recipe and they'd be like, oh, here, let me just write it down for you. And hi, do you want this shirt off my back too? Right. Like it was a very kind industry that didn't keep secrets, because it'd be like, well, you can brew this exact same recipe, but it's on your system with your water and your, time concept of when you do your hopping times. And so it'll never be exactly the same. I mean, Budweiser
Totally.
does it and props to them. That's science. But, back then
for 10 years, all IPA was like 2-row Munich, Cascade, and like, Chinook or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, right.
all the same IPA.
Totally. And I feel like, yes, every industry has its issues with, an unbalance of male to female. I mean, let's say a lot of industries do. There's probably not a huge CPA industry of women who get together and talk like we do, right? Like, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about this industry, is that it does allow us to get together, because by nature it already does that. But that you can then go, oh my God, we're all these women in the industry. We're going to get together, because that's already what we do, right? It's what we do as an industry, and that we can peel it off and do it in different ways, right? We're starting to see more diversity. We're starting to see people of color getting into it, and I think that it's all like it's all the little factions of it coming up together, and then finding your people. Hopefully your people are all the people, but the people that you go, oh my God, look at how many there are, I mean, if I were anywhere else and somebody went, hey, there's like 20 brewers in here, I'd be like, really? Rad. Like if it was, if I went to a CPA convention, I don't know why I keep saying that because tax season's coming, but if we went to a CPA convention and someone's like, hey, all the brewers raise their hand and there's 20 of us, I'd be like, this is dope. This is so cool.
Well, it honors the beverage also. Historically, it's a communal beverage. It brings people together. It's supposed to be multi-generational. It's supposed to be, a convivial aspect of community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. I mean, nobody gets together over water. I mean, some people do now. It's okay. There's no stigma in that, but beer's always been that, right? There's always been pubs. That's been your living room. When you live in a small cabin, you go down to the pub, right? Or you live in a small house, and the whole community comes to the pub to hang out with each other and then go back to their homes and their lives. So it is like, that is the history of it, right? That it's supposed to be that way. We're all sharing and caring and hanging out with each other. And it's a wonderful thing.
And when you raise a glass and introduce yourself, amazing things can happen. Like, I thought that you were too cool to be my friend. There's so many, like so many people that are my friends. I'm just like, oh, she'll never want to hang out with me. And then I just talk to them and I'm like, oh my God, wait, we're like so compatible. We're going to be best friends.
Right. I mean, I think, that, and I'm going to say this is an industry thing, but there's brewers that I like, when I was brewing, there were brewers that were higher up, and I'd just be like, oh my God, you remember my name? Are you kidding me? Because
Totally.
it's more like a level of, not because they're dicks or whatever, but it's more like the level of knowledge, right? It's like seeing your professor or whatever and being like, oh, I can't believe you remember me, or like being the TA or whatever. Like I definitely remember that there's certain brewers that I hold at a level, and then they'll be like, hey, Melissa, and I'm like, oh, like
I'm not
know
worthy.
My name.
I'm not worthy.
Totally. And I mean, I think part of that aspect in this industry is that it probably is in other industries too, but this is the one we're in, but like I basically learned through apprenticing. I mean, some jobs I got paid for and some jobs I didn't, right? But like, yes, you can go and get a degree in brewing and you can learn the science side of it. I took the other side of it. So like that community and the show of value to you as a person, right? I'm going to take time to teach you this. I'm going to take time to share information with you, even if we're equal or higher, if we're equal or at different levels. It's that time to show respect and share information. And that's fucking awesome.
Man, I'll drink to that.
Hell yeah.
Aside from having a perfectly curated beer list and a wonderful publican, an amazing cooler, highly knowledgeable staff, the Good Hop is kind of known for one other thing.
Indeed we are. And you know what? I would like to say that it was a mistake that I painted my walls green. But maybe it wasn't. It was some foreshadowing of what was to come.
So I mean, this is basically radio. So the Good Hop has a very special tradition. Somebody had a really incoherent Instagram post on your comment on your page that I quote all the time. No more bergs were had elsewhere, or more bergs were never had elsewhere. So I love to say that. And after a night at the Good Hop, this maybe says more about me than anyone else. But when I was younger, at the end of the night, when I took off my bra, like money would fall out. And then like later on, like in my later 20s, at the end of the night, it was earplugs, because I just had, earplugs tucked in for later retrieval. And then, but after a night at the Good Hop, it's bird caps.
I find I have a lot of them in my pockets on a regular basis. Well,
shall we? Is there is there anything else that you do you have a message that anything we missed?
No. I mean, you know what? I know this is going out to the beer community, right? But like, just keep drinking beer, keep supporting your small bars, support your breweries all the way, but go even farther, support your retail bars, support your bottle shops. They're the ones that are giving you the diversity in beer and giving you the different selections. Other than that, it's just beer. Just enjoy it.
People ask me all the time, like, "Oh, I'm drinking a PBR. I'm drinking a Tecate. You must hate that." And I'm like, "No, you're drinking beer. Like that's cool. Is it non-alcoholic beer? I mean, that's cool too. Like,
you know what? There's some amazing non-alcoholic beers out there right now. Like
beers coming out.
I mean, I think we're still crafting a beverage, and what that beverage brings us is community, right? So like, yeah, we all have some opinions about some of the beverages versus other beverages. But like in the end, like, does it bring you community? Did you have a good time? Did you meet somebody cool? Like, great. Cheers. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, with that, we probably should do an Underburg.
I know. I'm like, cheers to that. I just got to take the paper off. Sorry for that noise.
I mean, I can't hand you this cap.
It's okay. I'll take my cap and I'll put it in my bra to be surprised with later.
Just for old time's sake. Well, later when I see you can hand it back to me and I'll add it to our 72,000 caps that I have.
Excellent.
In the office.
Well, I raised this tiny bottle of Berg to you, Melissa, and the Good Hop and the community that you fostered there, because it's been very impactful, and I appreciate you. Thank you. Can't wait to see what happens next.
Cheers. Spicy.
Hey, spicy. And with that, so thank you again, Melissa. Wonderful to see you. And Melissa will be back on the next episode of this show as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of her choosing. That will be on the air in 2 weeks. So make sure that you tune in for that. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media to support journalism in the beer space, and check out patreon.com allaboutbeer. I'm Kat Wiest. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast. And thank you, Melissa, for hanging out with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Cheers.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Discover the advantage of using new and unique ingredients like lemon myrtle or Lapsang Souchong. First Tea has been working with brewers to introduce distinctive, high-quality botanicals for innovative craft beers. They focus on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsttea.com.